everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Martha Rozak, and I am the Assistant Director of Junior High Student Ministries here at McLean Pres. So if you've been following along in our series on the Psalms, you read Psalm 89 yesterday, and you saw that the psalmist, speaking on behalf of the Davidic Jews, essentially asks the question, God, how does any of the destruction that we're seeing around us, any of this confusion, line up with your promise that you would never abandon us without a leader? Because it sure looks like you have. Where is the hope in our situation, God? Today, we're going to be diving into Psalm 90, the first psalm in book 4 of our 5-book Psalter, which is an important thing for us to note as we take into consideration the order of the whole of the Psalms. And I'll expand on that in just a minute, but first, let's read together Psalm 90. From everlasting to everlasting, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord. How long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So right at the beginning of our psalm, we notice that this psalm is a prayer of Moses, the man of God, which is not only rare in the text of the Psalms, but also important because who was Moses? Well, he was the man who wrote the very first book in our Bibles, the only man who proclaimed God's rule before there ever even existed a monarchy or a temple or a land for God's people. Psalm 90 starts by answering the question that Psalm 89 yesterday ended with. Psalm 89 asks, How long, Lord, will you hide yourself forever? Lord, where is your former great love, which in your faithfulness you swore to David? Essentially saying, the kingdom and the temple, the only way we know to reconcile ourselves to you, a holy God, are gone. And it looks like you've failed on your promises to us, Lord. Well, whoever put the Psalms together wanted us to be able to answer this question. So they put Moses' response in the very first book 4 of the Psalter. Lord, you have been our dwelling place through all generations. Before the mountains were born, you brought forth the whole world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Moses' response is essentially, how long? Oh, God's love for you was there long before David was around. It's not gone. His love is always there, even though it doesn't feel like it right now. And so here we read in Psalm 90 that God's reign and rule began far before David's lineage. We go on to be reminded of God's perspective on us, on our fragility in verse 3, our sin in verse 8, our time in verse 10. And we also see God's perspective on what we do and the way that we choose to live our lives and fill our days in verse 17. Ultimately, we see that the way that we spend our time matters to God, even in the midst of chaos. So I mentioned earlier that the overall order of the books matters in the Psalms. And as Psalm 90 kicks off book 4 of 5, we see the psalmist transition to cast our vision to one of hope. If God promised that his kingship would reign forever, but it's gone right now, then I guess it will come back someday. So here in books 4 and 5, the psalmists are helping God's people, both then and today, answer the question, how then should we live while we wait for the king to return? Hopefully there's an obvious connection beginning in your minds between the people of God in 580 BC, after the chaos of the Babylonian destruction of the monarchy, when this text is written, and the people of God today in 2020 AD, as we too live in the midst of chaos of COVID-19 and of the Lord's moving in the heart of our own senior pastor to answer a call to a new church, and of the injustices committed every day against our brothers and sisters of color. Psalm 90 reminds us that God always rules. It may not appear that he's ruling or keeping things under control, but he is. We also live post the death of, but thankfully also resurrection and ascension of our King, Jesus. And so we too are waiting on God's kingdom to return. My middle and high school friends at MPC, and many even younger than that, know that we all live between chapters 3 and 4 of our 4-chapter gospel narrative. King Jesus redeemed the world once and for all, and although he is absent right now, we know that he's coming back to restore the world and to make all sad things come untrue, as our friend C.S. Lewis said. So as we see in Psalm 90, and as we'll see in the rest of the Psalms that follow, we can wait for the kingdom to return in hope, trusting that his love is everlasting, that it has always existed, even at the beginning of time, and it always will. And we can remember that we are not our own rulers. We are one day going to return to dust, and there is wisdom in numbering our days so that we might turn to and trust in the one true King, Jesus, who had compassion for us and satisfies us each morning with his unfailing love, enables us to sing for joy because he died for our sins on the cross.